Hi, I'm Harold Caldwell. I'm an employee here at Colonial Williamsburg. I'm currently an apprentice carpenter. Been here for about 13 years. I've always had an interest in woodworking. Been working in wood for about going on 20 years. And for me, being an apprentice carpenter really accentuates my woodworking experience, allows me to expand on what I know. Um, and in addition to learning how to build houses Noah way, and that's a benefit for me, to just the knowledge of knowing, how to do that, and to contribute to, reconstructing houses here at Colonial Williamsburg. Um, I do this job to, honor my ancestors, the people that came before me, and because I have a love for history, this is another reason why I do what I do. Um, and I enjoy pretty much, I say almost every minute, despite all the that's around it. But I do enjoy what I do, especially in their interaction with the guests, especially for those aha moments. So um, that's just me in a nutshell.
And I'm Adam Canaday. I'm a carriage driver. I've been here since I was probably about 5 or 6 years of age. And been carriage driving or working in the coach and livestock department since 2013. Enjoy everything about it. Enjoy the guests that come here. And what I do on a daily basis is my best to deliver the culture that is kind of somewhat left behind sometimes, and do it in the most relevant way, but also most respectful way for those that have come before me, that are going to come after me, and what's going to benefit myself and my colleagues.
Good afternoon. My name is Ayinde Martin. I'm a journeyman carpenter here at Colonial Williamsburg. I have been working for the foundation off and on since I was about 12 years old. And I guess my object is to speak for people who've gone before me and tell the whole exact story of the historic area here. I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Obviously, there are 3 black guys in front of you. And our focus in our discussion today, we'll be discussing the lives of enslaved and free tradespeople working in the city here. I guess just to give a little bit of background of how I came into doing this job. I was a junior interpreter, much like Adam was, and walking around this town gave me the opportunity to step in people's footsteps who have gone before me. Learning about their lives and then being able to convey the truths that I learned about those individuals' lives. That's my aim when I do this job. In particular, when we're all doing trades work, we're all doing skilled labor. More often than not, the idea behind the institution of slavery, or at least what people understand about it today, is more so about enslaved people working in a field growing tobacco or cotton or wheat or rice or what have you. And we wanted to give a little bit more insight into the skilled laborers that you will see those enslaved and free blacks doing. So, the idea behind our discussion and what gives us a lot of opportunity to look at the individuals is knowing about their individual skills and the fact that they're listed on a lot of runaway ads. That gives us a lot of opportunity to focus on not just that individual's life, but what other people would see in that enslaved person's life. So I wanted to pose a question to both of my coworkers here, and either one of you can start. It doesn't matter. What is the most challenging thing that you deal with on a daily basis in your interpretation?
I'll go first. So I would say it's kind of a series. So probably the most challenging thing is first, people think that, you just came to work at 8:45 and they say, all right, you're going to be a carriage driver today. So understanding that there's a real skill that you have to develop behind it, and understanding that we take it serious. So it's not just, okay, I worked from 8:45 to 5:15 and now my skill's done or my job's done. And then probably I would say the second biggest thing is getting the folks that we work with to understand and appreciate that as well. Because from outside looking in, it looks really easy until somebody has to physically pick up the reins and do it. And then it's, oh, that was a lot tougher than what I thought. And third is, when most people take our uniform, or their uniform off, yours still is on. So it's still on. Outside of this clothing that we're allotted, we still have a particular uniform that the guests see and that their mind has been trained to see. So you have to, in the most respectful way, kind of untrain it and get them to just take a slight step back so you can bring them 2 steps forward. So.
Just piggybacking off what Adam said, it's just, when people come to the site, for instance, and like Ayinde and I are there, and they'll completely pass us and talk to our white colleagues, even though we might know the same instance. So sometimes there's challenges in just getting people to talk to you, or even wanting to come on the site. It's an interesting dynamic of seeing the guest interaction to us, particularly if it's just like for instance Ayinde and I at the carpenter yard, if people want to come in or not. And sometimes I'll stop at the beginning of the gate and you'll see them talking and conversing amongst themselves whether they want to come in and engage or not. And we see people who will actually come straight up to the gate and we think they're coming in, they seem interested until they see both of us and they'll turn right back around and leave. So we have interesting kind of circumstances we deal with. We're dealing with guests and their preconceived notions of, I guess what they think Colonial Williamsburg is, what they think they're going to hear. What kind of, compartment they put you in terms of them getting that you're enslaved and you don't know anything or whatever the case may be. It's kind of interesting ball of wax. So you really gotta have a skin, really gotta get a thick skin to do this job and to be able to interpret what we're interpreting.
Yeah, the challenges I deal with are common, and that's because when we're African American men discussing anything, period. Just as you said, Adam, your costume when you leave to go home, your 18th century costume, you change clothes, but you still have this skin that's on, and that 18th century or today requires you to have answers to questions that someone is going to ask of you, regardless if they're, I guess, justified in that. I don't know if justified is the right word, but 18th century, an enslaved individual or a free black individual, skilled or unskilled, at any given time, they will have to explain their existence as much as possible for their safety. If I'm a free black person walking through Williamsburg and people don't know me, they're going to ask, well, who are you? Do you have papers on you? Do you have a pass on you? What's your business here? And I have to do that not in 2020 as well. So the difficulty a lot of times for me is when that subject matter of racism, of the institution of slavery comes up. There are people who, because I have this black skin, are immediately and extremely comfortable in asking me whatever they want to ask, just as many times, if not more, as this skin, shows some sort of a threat or some sort of a misunderstanding to somebody, and then I'm stuck with dealing with someone's fear, all the while having to keep my composure, keep my emotions in check, and understanding that what I'm saying to somebody, I'm only trying to convey some sort of information, some sort of bridging, making some sort of understanding between myself and that other individual. That's a daily thing. That is a daily thing that we have to deal with. Where else should we take our conversation? What other things are on your mind?
Open book.
Yeah.
Wherever
go. I was thinking about, having to convey to guests the skill set of many of these enslaved people and the skills that they obtain, and the multiple skills, not just one set, but multiple sets of skills, and getting guests to understand how slaveholders benefited from just one enslaved person with multiple skills and the amount of money that they made, and trying to get folks to understand just the impact of an enslaved treatment, whether you're talking about architecture at, some of the architecture at Monticello or at Monticello or Mount Vernon. You know, the carpentry that went into, you know, the palace or Bruton Parish Church, you know, a lot of that having to do with enslaved people and trying to convey just trying to get folks to understand just how a massive of a impact that enslaved people had in building not only Virginia, but a good deal of the 13 colonies. And some folks, they accept it and are listening, and some folks just don't buy into it. And some folks will actually say that they don't buy into it. So we're having to prove to guests and by, you know, our primary evidence that we have just how influential the slave tradesmen were. I think that's a job that's continuing to be ongoing. And that's why, for me personally, I like to have some of our documents with me so I can actually let guests see exactly just how skilled these enslaved people were and how much these slave owners benefited from their labor.
Yeah, it's definitely a monopoly of talent and skill, and the best for me is when you're talking to little kids, because little kids are super duper honest, and so they don't have a bias, or they haven't yet started to understand, you know, the bias, and if they ask you a question, you can always kind of play with it, and you can answer their question and then feed the adult and like nourish everybody at the same time. So I like having children ask, because they're brutally honest. And for me, it's always a challenge, because if you can't interpret to a 4-year-old, it's going to be super duper hard to interpret to somebody that's 40. And if you can break it down in a way where everybody gets it, because when a child asks you about a slave and they look at it as a person, they don't look at it as the term first. They just, so why is it called a slave? Because you're a person. And then you start going into the, you know, complexity of it, but still keeping it, you know, 101. And the first thing they usually say, well, they were smart, they're people. And it's just that portion of it, getting the idea that someone who was enslaved is defined as property, but you still are a person. You still have feelings. You still have emotion. You have a talent, a skill set. And getting people to understand these individuals, these slavers, didn't go to Africa to get just anybody. They were going to get people who already had established that skill and that was shown, so they knew where they were going. They were going here for folks who had agricultural experience. They were going to this portion of the coast for folks who knew and understood, you know, blacksmithing. So getting folks to realize just how much more of the onion there is, because it's multiple layers to it, I think is important. And, you know, recognizing that sometimes you're not going to, you know, get it all, and you're not going to have everybody, you know, agree, you know, as part of it. But you still go out and give the effort, because you may have one person who doesn't get it, but even if they don't get it, they're probably still going to talk about you. Yeah. So you're still going to have somebody who's going to still get it, because whether or not they said it in a positive way or a negative way, I was in your head. Yeah. So, and you'll probably go fact check me to see if I was right or wrong. And if you look for it and you see it,
that's what we want to do.
Yeah.
That's what the aim is.
Yep.
Yeah, we have a lot of responsibility to make sure that there's an agency to these individuals' lives. Yeah. That we talk about them first as humans, and the institution of slavery is what these human beings were placed into. We do ourselves a disservice if we just speak of them as enslaved people, as slaves first, and not this was Isaac, or this was Johnny, or this was a manservant to whatever gentleman you want to discuss, whatever of our founding fathers. He had a footman.
Yep.
You know, within arm's reach or within earshot constantly. That was a human being that did that job also. I'm wondering if we have any questions that we might have
that'd be good.
We've had posed to us. I'm itching to understand.
We do have a few questions, gentlemen. We've got one from Jason, who was curious how you look at yourselves as historians first and tradesmen second, or vice versa, or as both and at the same time.
Well, I'd say both.
Yeah, both. I'll say both, only because it's personally that I had my mother and father taught me. You know, we can start off a whole lot of statements like that, but I already knew the importance of what the institution of slavery meant to my family and the area that I grew up in, all that sort of stuff before I started working at Colonial Williamsburg when I was 12. So I was already a historian. I was already playing around with tools, figuring out what I was supposed to use this tool for. That the tool that I brought in today is a draw knife, and I can tell you I've used a draw knife when I was 12 years old working here, during summers and working out at Carter's Grove Plantation. I've used this draw knife to make multiple thousands of shingles for buildings that we've reconstructed in the historic area. So that story of growing up in this institution, that kind of told me, not only are you a historian, but you're also learning how to do, you're learning skills that they used in the 18th century as well. Yeah.
We have another question that came in from someone watching. Were tradespeople allowed, or were Black tradespeople allowed any form of education?
In a sense, your apprenticeship is an education, and a lot of times there will be reading involved in that. So I always like to tell folks, and it's one of those stereotype breakers where it's never illegal in 18th century Virginia for an enslaved person to read. There are times where an enslaved individual will not be educated by their master. It might not be just by their master. It could be someone the master has hired to teach that person. But it's never illegal. And that also, that shows on the skills that they had. When a lot of folks in Virginia who are free and white don't know how to read, but they're enslaved individuals who know the classics. That's something that a lot of folks don't have the opportunity to understand. And even some days we don't get to cover that in the interpretation in the 7 minutes that we might have with somebody. So yes, there were enslaved people who were educated in reading and writing.
And for, the job of a coachman, the education there is going to go in several different ways. So not only is it, the anatomy of the horse, the hoof, the foundation of the animal, no hoof, no horse, but also understanding the roadways and how to fill out a coaching log for how long you've traveled, where you stayed. That's oftentimes filled out by that enslaved, driver or footman that's with them. Oftentimes referred to as a hostler as well. So they usually will have some form of education there, and you see it in wide varieties where it's really, really intense, education and based on the driving. And then you see where some of it's just getting the one-on-one, the basics, and then they're put under somebody who's already done that job. And then that education is learned, by being around. And then I think too, just to piggyback off of what Ayinde said, people are just, nosy individuals anyway, and are always curious. So if you teach me something, or you've learned something, 9 times out of 10, you go, hey, let me show you this real fast. Yep. So there's an education that's going to be, spread around communities and amongst the people that oftentimes may not be written down, but people are still going to be educated in that way. So I think that's important to realize too. The time and the date may change, but the people are very much still the same.
And if you're thinking about the trades and what kind of jobs they're doing, that's going to require reading and mathematics. If you're talking about joinery, if you're talking about carpentry, most of the trades are going to require some kind of reading, writing, some kind of education in order for tradesmen to be able to do tradespeople to do their job. So that would be absolutely necessary for a slaveholder to be able to educate their enslaved people, so they can be able to do their job thoroughly and completely. So that was absolute. That had to be for many enslaved tradesmen.
Let's talk sort of a similar topic, but for us today. What are some of the best ways for us, and how have you learned about enslaved and free Black tradespeople of the past? What are some of the sources that you can go to?
We've got a number of sources here. So fortunately, because the foundation's been around for a while, we've had folks come before us that have laid the groundwork, so we can build off of that. You've always got the Rockefeller Library. When there's an internet, you've got an endless means to get to sources. The old Virginia Gazette's newspaper clippings. JSTOR is amazing for that. And then ourselves. So if there's something that you don't know, I run by Ayinde almost 4 days a week, so I can ask him, hey, a question. I can ask Harold a question. My mom works here. Hey, Mom. I can ask her a question. But we've got several sources and ways to be able to do that, and then Enslaved actual autobiographies, because a lot of times when you read those, like Wormley Hughes is a gentleman that talks a lot about enslaved drivers, and he's from Monticello, so that's a good source there.
Yeah, also Isaac, who was I think he was a tinsmith and a blacksmith at Monticello, and he someone chronicled his life, and it's called From Monticello to Petersburg, Jefferson's Isaac. I think it's written by Ronald Seagrave. That's a good primary document of an enslaved tradesman's life on a plantation, in particular Thomas Jefferson. That's a good, I think that's a good, read too if you want to know about enslaved tradesmen and their lives. That's a really good one. I like that one. I think primary documents are good because it's not a primary document. What I mean by primary documents is that it was written by the people actually living then, not a secondary source like written by an author or a scholar. The primary sources are really great because it's in their words and their writing. So it affords a little bit more support to what you're saying when you're actually reading the documents that they wrote. It really helps to support, what we're saying and what we're trying to convey to people in terms of tradesmen and just how skilled they are in their experiences as enslaved people in Williamsburg and throughout the colony.
Let's see. If I had, I will say my favorite thing to read is slave narratives, just because of the dialect that those narratives are written in, because I can identify with it, mainly because I have family members that speak like that still today. It's weird where you read what someone's saying written in dialect. I understand that word, but if you were just to spell it out and put it on a piece of paper,
what is that?
Yeah, what does that mean? What does ever mean? Was actually ever.
Yeah, I had to read that.
Yep.
Yeah, I had to read it over a couple times.
Yeah.
We touched on this a little bit, but what are some things that you would want everybody to take away from a trade shop visit about the topic of slavery and race in the 18th century, or a trade shop or carriage ride, whatever it is?
All right, let me go first. I like to make sure that people understand that these individuals survived through this. If I really wanted to, every time I gave an interpretation to someone, every time I talked to a guest, we could both finish that interpretation in tears. It's easy to talk about the horror stories of the institution of slavery. It's easy to talk about the physical punishment that these bodies endured, from childbirth to old age, and the fact that you don't own your body if you were enslaved. Someone else owns your body. And furthermore, you don't have the right to defend your own body. That's the hard part. But what I want people to understand after they finish talking to me, at least, if I've done my job properly, is knowing that these individuals survived through this institution, and more so, I want to discuss how they survived through it. What techniques did they use? Where did they find the love that would get them up the next morning to go through this, this institution again? What kept them on that property as opposed to running off? If it's family and it's not blood related, there's still that human aspect of I take care of your children because they're there, but because they're children, and that's a human responsibility. That's the thing that I want people to leave our property with. The fact that they're enslaved people's hands on every building in this city in the 18th century, but also that those enslaved people survived through this institution. That at least 3 of us are sitting right here doing this job.
Yeah, because
in 2020.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think even today in 2020, my mom always told me, this is the biggest monument to the work of those people that came before us, and if we don't appreciate it and take the time to understand it, because somebody's hand, even in the restoration, 9 times out of 10, look like us.
Mhm.
So this is, a legacy in itself that's left behind. And now we've got the ability to put words with that legacy and to be able to make it real and give it a feeling, give it something to be proud of. Because if somebody that doesn't look like me can come to Colonial Williamsburg and leave and feel proud, there should be that same feeling for that black kid that comes here, for that black boy, that black girl, the black family that comes here. It shouldn't be, oh man, we should have went to Busch Gardens. It should be, man, that was what I wanted. So I think that's really important, and just understanding how far we really are involved in it. It gives you a sense of pride as well.
Yeah, I would like guests to be able, when they come, to just see the impact with their own eyes. Like reading literature when they're visiting sites. Even if it's somebody just passing by who don't have a ticket. Like for me, I would love for them to just see the impact just by reading the impact that enslaved people had here in Williamsburg. That is something that's always been on my mind. And that I just wish folks could really understand that. And I think for me, that's something that I hope will, maybe come down the road and really get an impact just by seeing it, just by someone walking down the road.
Because you all have been doing this sort of, on the ground for so long, I'm sure you have lots of ideas of how a place like Colonial Williamsburg and other museums can interpret enslaved and black tradespeople better. Are there things that come to mind?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, every day. Yeah.
I'll put this, the first thing I'd say is I really wish there were more African American people who would want to do this job. Not just because I don't want to speak for everybody, but because over half of the town is black in the 18th century. 52% of Williamsburg is black. I want a guest that sees me in the morning to not see my face that afternoon, but see other faces of African Americans, so they don't have to look twice and say, "Didn't I see you earlier?" Yeah. I'm attempting to people the town, I guess if I had the opportunity to have more African Americans working here and interpreting in every part of the museum, not just in trades, but giving tours through buildings, and fife and drum, and if we could see that 52% represented in 2020, that would be a good testament to look back on the past and say, this is what we're doing today.
Yeah, starting those outreach programs back again would be great. They go to high schools, universities, colleges, and tell them about what we're doing. Hopefully, get people to apply. I think that would be great too. To get.
Yeah, we've got to use what's close to us. I mean, we've got the community, right around. We're literally running down Williamsburg, so it's no reason, because Highland Park's right over there.
Right.
Carver's Garden is directly down here.
Right.
Brookhaven, and so many of those people that I went to school with, their grandparents, or a chef over here, or he was a brick mason here, and they're still alive. So you don't have to go and say, "Oh, I wonder where he is." He's at 137 Brookhaven Drive. Or he's over here. So it's literally, Sorry to put your information down. But you literally can just get in the car and go to them, and they'll talk. So we can't act like it's the boogeyman, because obviously they worked here. So there is a relationship. They're still gonna, want to ask those questions, and still want to see, hey, how's it going right now? Is he still working here? So and so still there? We just have to, take the time to, put the first step there and just take it. So
we have time for one last question. Are there tradespeople from the past that inspire you, help guide your work, or whose story resonates with you in particular, or even buildings or objects that sort of draw you in and make you, want to do this, every day?
Billy Lee, for me, Washington's personal valet. manservant, huntsman. He's a guy that I like just because we know so much about Washington, but there's so little that's said about William Lee. We have information on him, but still there's not a lot of conversation about him. So he would be somebody that I'd take a fancy to.
I don't have a particular tradesman, but like I was mentioning earlier about Isaac, I really enjoy reading his story because, and for me it was real personal because he showed his life beyond his job at Monticello. Two things that stuck out to me was him staying up late night by a fire making a doll for his daughter, and he was talking about how the doll, he had wires for hands of the dog, that legs and arms and legs can move, and he made that doll for his daughter, and how he mentioned that when people died, that they would plant periwinkle around, the grave site, and like things like that was like really rich, and hearing it from Isaac's point of view was really great, and it stays with me to think about what he went through and just giving me a glimpse into his life. So Isaac is one that kind of sticks out for me.
Well, the two people I think about a lot. One is Peter Deadfoot. You could his runaway ad, I believe, is listed on our Instagram page and also on our Facebook page. So Peter Deadfoot, his runaway ad is long, and the amount of different skills that he could be identified by is amazing. One in particular is he's called much the greatest scytheman in all of America, with or without a cradle, which means it's a guy that's chopping wheat, but he's the best guy in America in the 18th century. His actual name was William Swan. The other person I like mentioning is a man by the name of Cesar Tarant, who lived in Hampton, which is where I'm from, so 30 miles south of here. And Cesar Tarant was a waterman. He was a boat pilot. Basically, he's a ferry driver, but he's involved during the Revolution, ferrying whatever goods acknowledged and unacknowledged across the James River and back and forth through the Chesapeake Bay. The amount of things that guy knew, just because of the work that he did, and more so the amount of people that knew what he would do, what he could do, is fascinating to me. I like bringing those two names up.
Harold, Ayinde, and Adam, thank you so much for taking your time and sharing your work. To all of you watching at home, thanks for tuning in. All of our programs are made possible by the generosity of our many donors. To learn how you can support programs like this, please follow the link pinned to the comments below or visit colonialwilliamsburg.org. I'm sure we'll all sit down and have these conversations again in the not too distant future.
I hope so.
Gentlemen, do you have any final thoughts for everyone watching along?
I don't, other than have a blessed afternoon.
Thank you.
Everyone be safe, be
Stay
well.
safe.
Yeah.
Come see us when you can.
Yeah, you know where to find us.
P.O. Box 1776.